Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to New York University Casa Italiana, Zerilli-Marimò. It's a great pleasure to have a Friday evening that is going to be dominated by Italian women in cinema. And we welcome this proposal that came to us from Federico Spoletti and his colleagues, open arms, because there are at least two very important components to this edition in particular. One is to draw attention to women in cinema, not as an afterthought, but as a concept that should be explored, supported, learned, studied, and much more. And the other issue that will be discussed briefly, but that will probably develop in a further edition, is accessibility in cinema. Now, accessibility is a concept that you might have heard many times. It's one of these buzzwords now, right, that everybody uses without knowing exactly what it is. It is extremely important to guarantee that everybody has access to media productions, and in particular to cinema. Otherwise, we run the risk of having fantastic cultural products that are going to be available only to some parts of the population. We have done historically that mistake many, many times in the past, excluding certain categories of people. And we should not continue doing it for the present. So the issue of accessibility, it's an issue that is political, that is sociological, and that is cultural. And we wholeheartedly support the work that you're doing. So without further ado, I'm asking Federico Spoletti to introduce in turn his colleagues, and to maybe we should go over the scaletta. Okay, so Federico, facciamo insieme. So now the first part is with Federico that will talk to us about what is accessibility.
Yeah, short introduction about the project and then a few words about accessibility, because as you mentioned, we're going to have possibly a dedicated event in spring 2023 here, if you're having this first part.
Absolutely.
And then we are going to screen two shorts, one by Jasmine Trinca, Being My Mom, and a second one called Il Moro by Daphne Di Cinto, who is here. And we are going to have a roundtable about women equality in the film industry, comparison between Italy and the United States with a number of prestigious Italian filmmakers. And then there will be a feature film, La ragazza ha volato by Wilma Labate. She was supposed to be here, but she couldn't manage, and she'll be present by Zoom.
Okay.
As it happens sometimes now.
And Daphne is going to be here for a Q&A after her film, so stay for that.
Correct. Okay.
So we have a packaging. Now, Federico, you're going to tell us something about the project and accessibility in cinema.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Stefano, for having us. We're very excited to be here at the Casa Italiana, the home of culture, Italian culture in New York. WICIP stands for Women in Italian Cinema Inclusive Project, and with this lady, Anne-Katrin Titze, we created this project to promote Italian cinema written and produced, directed by women all over the world, and also in an accessible format. So we have two components in this project, women and inclusion. And we have to Mi piace l'oreola. We, as we mentioned before, what do we do in this project? We show Italian films written and produced by women in a number of locations all over the world. And we started in Toronto in March. We had another event in June in Orlando, and then after New York, we're going to Buenos Aires, São Paulo, Sydney, Brussels, Toulouse, a number of different locations and towns all over the world. And we show films, and we organize panels, roundtables about women's equality in the film industry and about accessibility and inclusion. We strongly believe that is an experience that must be fully experienced by anyone, even by people who have some form of sensory disability. It's not a question of a small segment of audience, but there are big numbers. One person in six at some point in their lives experience one form of sensory impairment. And so, once you have an inclusive film, you need to create accessible features, which means creating subtitles for the hard of hearing, captions like we call here in the US, which means subtitles also with additional information about noises, music, character identification, all those features that help people with well, deaf or hard of hearing. And also audio description, which means creating an audio comment that can be listened in the dialogue poses and help people who is blind or low vision to go to the cinema and experience the experience of the screening in the cinema in a community. And you will see that films will have subtitles of the image, and audio description is available through an app that is called Ear Catch, and this app allows you to download for each film the audio comment, and then synchronizes the audio that you can listen through your headphones in your smartphones, and the pause perfectly synchronized with the audio coming from the film. If you have 1 minute, you can download it and try, because the idea is also raise awareness with people that don't need them, but if you want to live in an inclusive world, and if someone can't experience a film because the accessible features are not available, that's in a way discrimination, and because they can't participate or not able to participate. The app is called ER Catch, E-A-R Catch. It's one of the most popular European apps that helps people with impairment to go to the theater and the cinema. And now I'm going to give the floor to Angela Prudenzi. She's a producer, she's a film critic, she is part of the selection committee of the Venice Film Festival. She does so many things, and also she decided with me to try to apply to a call by the Ministry of Culture, the Italian Ministry of Culture, to promote Italian cinema. We presented this project that was selected, and and also to Lilia Pinot, the interpreter, one of the most popular interpreters in New York.
In italiano perché così mi spiego meglio. Grazie anche da parte mia per aver accettato di presentare il progetto qui a Casa Italiana. È un grande onore per noi e per me è una vera emozione, perché significa molto essere con il progetto a New York. Tanti anni fa, veramente tanti anni fa, un secolo, una straordinaria donna italiana, produttrice e regista, Elvira Notari, aveva aperto qua a New York una sede della sua casa di produzione, ma qua a New York aveva portato solo la parte di distribuzione, perché aveva un sogno, quello di regalare agli immigrati che avevano dovuto lasciare l'Italia la possibilità di vedere dei film ambientati nel sud dell'Italia, ambientati a Napoli, e quindi di ricordarsi la patria che avevano dovuto lasciare. Ecco, Elvira Notari è stata una stella nel firmamento del cinema muto, una delle pioniere del cinema, tra le pochissime donne pioniere del cinema, però quando l'industria del cinema è diventata un affare, è diventata un business, soprattutto un affare per uomini, e lei ha sentito che quello non era più il suo mondo. Nello stesso momento c'è stato l'avvento del fascismo e la censura ha colpito duramente i film di Elvira Notari, che parlavano di gente povera, erano recitati in dialetto e raccontavano spesso di donne vittime degli uomini e della violenza degli uomini, e questo non era possibile raccontarlo. Adesso, dopo tanti anni, le cose sono cambiate, stanno cambiando, ma il cammino da fare è ancora lungo, e ne parleremo dopo con le amiche che sono qua, e credo che proprio per questo sia importante essere qui oggi insieme a delle registe di tante generazioni diverse, e a dirci che la strada tracciata da Elvira Notari è chiara e che la vogliamo seguire fino in fondo. Grazie.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that I was able to be here to present at Casa Italiana. It is a great honor to be here, and I'm highly emotional. It means a lot to me. It means a lot also because I'm thinking that many years, almost a century ago, in this town, an Italian woman, her name was Elvira Notari, she was a producer and a filmmaker in Italy, and she came to America, and here she opened offices for a production company. And in New York, she aimed to distribute Italian films, but just not any film. They were films that she meant to be shown to the immigrants, Italian immigrants here, who had had to leave behind their country. And these films were often set in the South. They were mostly from Naples, and they allowed the local immigrants to experience what they had left behind. She was a true star. She was a powerhouse. She was a star of silent cinema, and she was a pioneer at that. And however, when cinema slowly turned into a business, it became a male-dominated business. And Elvira quickly realized that that was no longer her world. That was not what she wanted to do. And therefore, sadly, then fascism took over and censorship became a force. And a lot of her movies, which had as protagonists poor people, they were in dialect, and often they told stories in which women were victims of male violence, and they were no longer allowed to be. And therefore, she closed down her company. And however, many years have gone by, and this situation has now changed. Having said that, a lot still needs to be done, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to talk about this here. There will be a panel with a lot of great female filmmakers and producers, and we will talk about all of that. But I think it's very important to be here, that we're here today, and we are honoring the legacy of Elvira, and it's extremely important that we continue to tread that path that she created for us.
Daphne,
Thank
congratulations.
you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. All my colleagues at New York University Florence talked about you, talked about your film. You had a screening with the students there. Everybody was enthusiastic, so I couldn't wait. Congratulations. And this is a directorial debut, so it's your first film as a director.
It is, yes.
And you had already experience in cinema as an actor, mostly,
Yes,
right?
I started out as an actor.
And it's not an easy debut. I mean, it's a costume film, it's an historical film. Expensive also.
I guess. I mean, I've been living at my parents' house for the past year and a half because I can't pay rent. But no, I mean, jokes aside, we did it with a budget of around 30K, and we shot it in 4 days. A lot of people came together to do this movie. A lot of people believed in the importance of the story that I was trying to tell and donated their talent and their props and their locations in order to make it happen.
And Daphne, it's not by chance that your first film as the director, it's a film about this character, this historical character. Tell us something about you and tell us something about this character. But first about you.
So I was born and raised in a very small town in the northeast of Italy.
Mettiamole il nome alla città.
Well, the town is too small, but it's near Ravenna.
Do you want to know the name of my town?
Come on.
It's called Bozzolo. That
Okay.
means cocoon. Total of 4,000 people. When I was growing up, 12,000 pigs. So
Okay.
you cannot beat that.
Oh, wow. See, I always say that in my town, there are more chickens than
There you
people.
go. We had more
yeah.
pigs. And
There you go.
so it's a small town in Romagna, near
Yes,
Ravenna.
yes. Well, I guess growing up as somebody who has a passion for storytelling, literature, history, art. I was used not to see myself represented in the history of my own country, and I got told that that was just the way it was. The only history that apparently represented me was the slave trade. And so when I recently came across the character of Alessandro de' Medici, and I mean, I'm in my 30s, and I went 3 decades on this earth studying in Italy, being educated in Italy, and without knowing the story of this guy. So when I found out, I just couldn't shut up about it. I started out with writing a pilot, because his life is so incredibly rich and eventful that a single feature film wouldn't be enough. And this was at the beginning of 2020, so I actually wrote the first draft of the pilot through the pandemic. The following summer, when there was that break between lockdown number 1 and number 2, I ended up going to see my parents in Italy and thinking to myself, what do I want to do? Do I want to wait for a production company to come and give me money to do this film and probably take it away from me and do whatever the hell they want, really? Or do I want to tell this story? And I've always wanted to direct. Actually, I've started having an interest in directing when I was in New York, because I studied here in New York. I spent 5.5 years here, and this just felt like the right story to start this new journey with. So I wrote a script for a short film and put together all these collaborators and this incredible team that became a small family for 4 days. And at the height of lockdown number 2, we all ended up in these 2 incredible medieval castles in the province of Bologna that they let us for free. I literally paid 100 euros for each castle. I don't know which gods were smiling on me, but they were. We just locked ourselves into these castles and we shot. And we rushed to finish this film, and 4 days weren't enough. I probably needed at least 6 to do what I really wanted to do. So, rewatching it is always great, but I always also see all the things that I wanted to do differently. But other than that, I'm really proud, because my goal when I started this project was to bring this story as far as I could to as many years as I could. And today we're screening literally at the same time in 2 different places in New York City. We just had this beautiful article come out on the Manhattan Herald, and I feel, a little closer to that goal.
You are more than closer. You hit it. You hit the goal.
Maybe yes, you're right.
And Daphne, do you think that the fact, for example, that they gave you the castles basically for nothing, did you tell them the story? Did you tell them the story?
I mean,
what is the reaction you get, especially in Italy, when you tell this story that everybody knows, that we know our Gonzaga or our Medici, we do not. And you bring out this story that is incredible, and that no director in the previous centuries or ever bothered. Like, we had 2 recent film series, TV series on the Medici. We had, of course, the documentary by Rossellini. We had a horrible PBS documentary on the Medici produced here in America. Never a mention, never a word about the origin of these men that was obviously remarkably different from the other men that were next to him. So what is the reaction you get when you tell the story before they see the film?
Well, I mean, I would start with saying that to this day, where Alessandro de' Medici rests in San Lorenzo in Florence. He is in this beautiful chapel sculpted by Michelangelo, and it's the same chapel where Lorenzo the Magnificent rests, and many other very important Medici men. Alessandro de' Medici is the only person that is not mentioned in, the signage for the tourists. So I think that really tells what the situation is. And the reaction I get when I start telling people is, I had no idea, mostly. A few people, actually, one person in Florence said, oh yeah, we know. We're not supposed to know, but we know. So there are different levels of knowledge out there. I would say that most people I've talked to really were supportive about telling this story. So, which is the only reason why I actually was able to pull this off. So I think that there are many more people out there that need to hear it, and hopefully we can make something bigger out of this.
Definitely. So it's an incredible story. His father was
The Pope.
The Pope.
It's actually controversial because officially his father was Lorenzo de' Medici, il Duca di Urbino. This is what was said, but actually quite a few historians, including the official historian of the Florence Grand Duchy, so the successor of Alessandro, said that Cosimo I told him in private that Alessandro was really the son of the Pope. And today historians tend to agree that Clemente VII was his father.
And the mother?
The mother was a woman of African descent that may have been enslaved or just a servant in the Medici household. And there as well, I know there are controversies out there. Wikipedia will tell you differently. But, well, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Daphne, before we don't go down the rabbit hole. But there is also something to be said about slavery and enslaved people in Renaissance Florence. And it's something that we don't really want to talk about, because the story that we have of the Renaissance in Florence is so beautiful, it's so glorious, and it seemed, it was this utopian place where everybody had a chance and everybody was creating beautiful things, and it is true. But there was also a component of the city that were enslaved.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult story to deal with, even today. Don't you think so?
Yes. What I think is also interesting is the fact that slaves back then weren't necessarily associated with black people.
No.
Actually, the word slave comes from Slav, so person of Slavic descent, because most slaves were from there. And another interesting fact is that back then, racism wasn't what we know it today. So Alessandro's issue wasn't that he was black, but was his low birth, which was obviously a different kind of discrimination that draws, I think, a very strong parallel to what is experienced today by a lot of Afro-European people.
Yes, and this idea of the legitimate and illegitimate children. And I think it's in one of the blurb of the film that at a certain point in the history of the Medici family, the main line is represented by three men that are all three illegitimate.
Yeah.
They were either born out of wedlock, or the mother was not a person that could be presentable in society. So there were, all of them had these things. Not to mention Leonardo da Vinci and many, many others. So what was with the illegitimate children, and the fact that, as we would say in Italy, had una marcia in più somehow. They were used to fight because nothing was given to them. They couldn't take anything for granted. And we had a student here that did this competition called Palazzo Strozzi Foundation. She's a student in a public school here in New York, high school. And when it came to, and she prepared a paper on Leonardo. And when we asked her, what makes Leonardo special? And she answered, he was an illegitimate child his father didn't recognize him immediately. And she went on saying, had he been a legitimate child, he would have been a notary like his father, and we would not know anything about Leonardo. So I found it very striking, the idea that being an illegitimate child, therefore having to fight for anything because you're going to be denied systematically everything, makes you stronger and makes you more determined. Do you have any thought about this idea of the illegitimate children as a category that have to show something more?
Well, I think it's such a strong parallel again with what happens today. If you ask a lot of Afro-European people, and I think that the experience goes for African American as well, they will tell you that they feel like they have to be 100,000 times better to get where they need to get than their peers. So I guess 500 years of history haven't changed much in a way.
Thank you so much. The Q&A is, of course, also for you, your questions. I don't want to monopolize Daphne, even if I could talk to her for an hour and a half. Yes, please.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Maxie.
She's a student of mine.
Yes,
She's very good.
I have been obsessed with the movie for a long time. One of the reasons why I chose to take, thank you, Professor Stefano's class. And I wanted to ask you, I heard him comment about the color palette. I wanted to ask, why did you go with those colors and the tones between the scenes that we see changing? When we start in one room, the lighter and then the darker, is that part of the progression of the film?
Yeah, I wanted to start in a way where Alessandro wouldn't be as prominent, because I felt that that was his being up until that moment. He kind of was always the plan B. And I wanted the light and shadows to reflect that. And as the film goes by, he comes more and more in the light. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to light certain details as much as I wanted because of the 4 days and the time constraints. But that's the concept behind it. And when we location scouted and we found these red rooms, burgundy rooms, it went well with the mood of the story and the costumes as well. If you see the paintings of the characters, both the cardinal and the Pope have these red and burgundy robes. So then everything kind of shifted in that direction, and we found this incredible costume, the one Alessandro wears with the red giglio. Yeah, so it kind of, in a way, constructed itself, and we just took what we had and did the best we could.
I really loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Yes.
I'm also a student in Stefano's class, and we recently watched The Decameron by Pasolini, and a big thing in that movie was that the dialect used in the movie wasn't the same one that Boccaccio used in Decameron. So I wanted to know if the spoken dialect you used in the movie, was there any stylistic choice in that, or was it just what is the most commercial one, and like what most people can like easily understand in today's day and age?
I wanted to draw this fil rouge between the past and the present. So I kept the dialogue, I would say, somewhat contemporary, with, a little tinge from the past. Yeah, so that was my choice. And for me, the dialogue, and it's dialogue heavy, and I am 100% aware of it, but I like it. So it's okay. I just wanted the words between them to really reflect the music of their souls. So especially in the dialogue between the Pope and Alessandro when they're at the altar, I just wanted that to have a certain rhythm and a certain musicality that really talked of the pain they were inflicting each other, willingly or not.
Yes, question there? Can you come get the microphone, please? Here, no. Here. I don't know. Thank you.
Now that you have this beautiful film to show, are you optimistic that you will get the funding to do what you want to do?
Well, hey, New York City. I mean, I'm here. Let's just do it. Am I optimistic? Well, I am optimistic. I'm an optimistic person. I think that if I weren't optimistic, I would have done a period drama for my directorial debut. Everybody thought I was crazy, which might be right. But yes, the answer to that is yes. I don't know when, I don't know how. And what I know is that I will work as hard as I can to keep it as authentic as I can, because we know that production companies and productions have certain requirements. But I am working day and night on making this project something bigger, and I hope to get there. Thank you.
And we wish you all the best. The only one promise, when the big thing comes out, you're going to come back and present
Of course, I'm going to come back before then.
Thank you. Please, again,
Thank you so much.
Daphne Di Cinto. E Daphne, stai qua perché c'è la
Sì, 5 minuti. So yeah, I really apologize about this. Unfortunately, I have another Q&A starting at 6:35, 10 blocks away, so I'm going to have to leave you all.
So we have the round table now, discussion show. I invite all the guests, the other
Thank
women
you again.
director. Grazie, Daphne. Grazie, cara.
Do we have everyone? I guess yes. The empty chair is for Daphne. So I see. You want to come closer? I come closer. Okay. I come closer. Okay. Let me introduce the illustrious panel to you. You can see their impressive bios on the handout that you have that you got when you came here. So let me just start with from far away, from Rome, Wilma Labate, who you see behind me, film director and producer, whose film The Girl Has Flown you are going to see right after this panel. Here on the stage we have Antonietta De Lillo, acclaimed director and producer, Elisabetta Lodoli, right here, director and screenwriter, Federica Belletti, right next to me, producer, and Angela Prudenzi, whom you've met before, who is a film critic and producer, and who is responsible for this event tonight. A translator for us will be Lilia. You also met her earlier. When I was invited to moderate this panel, I thought about a quote from Italo Calvino on folktales. In his introduction to his volume on Italian folktales, he remarks, he remembers the following Tuscan proverb, which is, "The tale is not beautiful if nothing is added to it." And I thought that was just very fitting about storytelling and about cinema today. So I want to start, Angela, with you. Where are we at? What is the status quo of the situation, women in film in Italy right now?
Dunque, qual è la situazione? Credo che questa sia la domanda chiave. All'inizio, quando ho salutato voi che siete qua oggi, ho detto che le cose stanno cambiando e che appunto da quando Elvira Notari aveva aperto la sua società di distribuzione qui molti anni sono passati, però credo che la vera domanda non sia stanno cambiando, ma quanto sono cambiate fino adesso. E purtroppo la risposta non è così positiva, perché siamo ben lontani dal traguardo del 50-50 di cui parliamo da anni, e la parità di genere all'interno dell'industria audiovisiva, parliamo sia di cinema che di televisione e audiovisivo in generale, è ancora lontana dall'essere raggiunta.
Well, this is a key question. What is the situation like right now? When we first met, I closed off my welcoming statement by saying that things are changing. And yes, we've come a long way since Elvira Notari's time. However, the true question is not, are things different or not? It's how much are they different? And sadly, the answer to this question is not very positive. We're still very far from the goal of a 50-50 split and gender equality in the audiovisual industry, and I'm including cinema and television as well, is not a reality yet.
Per farvi capire meglio, credo che sia necessario dare qualche percentuale, senza annoiarvi, ma solo alcuni numeri, perché i numeri sono quelli che danno, che fanno la differenza. E i numeri dicono qualcosa di molto preciso. Rispetto alla regia, nell'indagine che è stata fatta nel mondo dell'audiovisivo tra il 2017 e il 2020, non sono ovviamente ancora pubblici i risultati che riguardano il 2021 e neanche il 2022 che stiamo ancora vivendo. Questi dati ci dicono che nel mondo dell'audiovisivo i registi sono 1125 e le donne 213. Insomma, già credo che queste due cifre diano la dimensione esatta della differenza che c'è nel mondo del lavoro a livello di regie tra uomini e donne. Non va meglio negli altri campi. Il montaggio sono 827 uomini e 279 donne. Nella musica poi veramente sembra un deserto, 377 musicisti, insomma direttori di colonne sonore e 28 donne. Però c'è un campo in cui le donne sono in maggioranza, eccellono, e indovinate quale? È quello del make-up. 409 uomini e 1004 donne. È un'eredità che evidentemente si tramanda e dalla quale le donne non riescono a liberarsi, perché insomma si parla di trucco e quindi quello è il mondo nel quale evidentemente si pensa che le donne si possano esprimere al meglio.
In order to better understand, I'd like to quote some figures. You know, I want to talk about percentages. I don't want to bore you with that, but I think it's important to look at numbers so that we can truly feel what it's like. Let's talk about how many directors we have, how many are male and how many are female. We have a study that is about the time frame between 2017 and 2020. There's no publicly available data for the 2021-2022 time period. So if we look at that, in terms of directors, we have 1,115 men and 213 women. So yeah, you see that there's a huge gap there. And so definitely in terms of the sharing of responsibilities or in the industry, definitely no equality. And in the rest of the film industry and television industry, it is not any better at all. For example, for editing, we have 827 men and 279 women. And for the music department, in terms of scores for films and television products, it's a desert in terms of women. We have 377 male composers or musicians and only 28 women. Yet there's one field in which women do excel. And can you guess which one it is? Well, it's the makeup world, in which we have 409 men and 1,004 women. Why is that? Well, it's makeup. I guess the common wisdom is that women are good at that. And so this explains to you exactly what the world is in the film industry regarding equality of opportunities.
Ecco, sono numeri che fanno particolarmente male. E qua insomma ci sono delle registe e credo che anche a loro faccia male. E pensare che noi siamo il paese che non solo ha espresso Elvira Notari, che è una delle, come dicevo prima, una delle pioniere del cinema, ma siamo anche il paese dove ha vissuto e dove ha lavorato Lina Wertmüller, che è stata la prima donna regista a essere candidata all'Oscar. Ecco, eppure questo per decenni non ha portato alcun vantaggio alle donne. Accanto a Lina Wertmüller c'è stata solamente Liliana Cavani. Poi si sono affacciate tante altre registe, ma con estrema difficoltà sono riuscite a entrare nel mondo del lavoro e farsi accettare dalle produzioni. E anche adesso i numeri magari possono sembrare, come dire, possono dare l'impressione che ci sia un cambiamento, però se li guardiamo bene, se analizziamo cosa ci sta dietro quel numero di donne registe, si scopre che molte di loro sono autrici di cortometraggi o di documentari, cioè opere in cui il budget è molto più basso e quindi è più facile affacciarsi alla regia, mentre quando si parla di lungometraggi di nuovo nascono i problemi, perché è sempre difficile per una produzione accettare di letteralmente mettere in mano il denaro che conta, metterlo nelle mani di una donna. È come se ci fosse ancora una sorta di difficoltà ad accettare che una donna possa tenere in piedi una troupe e farsi ascoltare da dei reparti che sono tradizionalmente anche quelli pieni di uomini.
These numbers do hurt, and we have female filmmakers around me, and I'm sure they suffer because of this as well. Especially when we think that Italy is the country that created Elvira Notari, who was a pioneer at her time, and also it was the country that gave birth to Lina Wertmüller, who was the first woman who was nominated for an Oscar, the first woman director. And yet, for decades, next to Wertmüller, you only had Liliana Cavani. And yet, after some time, there have been other female filmmakers that reached some level of success, but always with significant challenges. It is very hard for women to be accepted by production companies to be the leaders of a big project. When you look at the numbers, you may even be fooled by them because they're not all that small in and of themselves. However, if you do analyze them in a more granular fashion, you will realize that a lot of these women filmmakers end up making shorts or documentaries, which are projects with a much smaller budget, and therefore it's easier to get them made. When you look at feature-length films, well, that's when problems come up. And it's still difficult for a production company to accept that, to give money and to put money in the hands of a woman, as if a woman is still not considered qualified enough to hold a crew together or to make sure that her crew listens to her the way men have been doing for a long time.
Ecco, non vorrei che si pensasse che il panorama sia più positivo per quello che riguarda le attrici, perché non è così. Anche in questo caso gli uomini la fanno da padrone, si scrivono ancora oggi film con protagonisti maschili e noi abbiamo in Italia probabilmente solo una donna che davvero può dettare legge come i colleghi maschi, Paola Cortellesi, che è una attrice che scrive anche i propri film e quindi forse questo vuol dire qualcosa. E pensare, non voglio rubare tempo perché credo che sia giusto che parlino le registe, pensare però che quando finalmente i film di donne vengono presentati nei festival, bene, vincono mediamente molti più premi dei film dei colleghi uomini. Questo ci dovrebbe far riflettere e soprattutto dovrebbe far riflettere i produttori e non costringere le registe a diventare anche produttrici di se stesse, perché è un doppio lavoro, mentre dovrebbero essere creative. Anche se la produzione è qualcosa di creativo e meraviglioso, ce lo dirà Antonietta De Lillo, però perché costringerle anche a pensare a occuparsi della parte finanziaria, cosa che non viene richiesta ai registi uomini?
I don't want for you to think that the situation is better for actors, because in that field as well, men are still protagonists, and it's very difficult for women to be regarded the way they should. So many movies are still written with male as protagonists, with no regards to the female character. In Italy, there's only one woman actor, an actress, Paola Cortellesi, who is a good actress, and she ends up writing her own scripts. And so I don't want to take up much more of your time, because I want to give the floor to the producers and filmmakers we have here. But I think it's very, very important for production companies to remember this, because then when you have films made by women, who end up in film festivals, on average, they end up winning a lot more awards compared to films made by men. So we should reflect upon that. And women shouldn't be forced to become also producers of the movies that they want to direct. And there's nothing wrong with becoming producers. And actually, Ms. De Lillo here is a great producer, and she'll talk to us about that as well. But I'm saying that women shouldn't have to do both jobs. They should be able to focus on the creative part without having to worry about taking care of the financial part as well, which is a problem that men generally don't have.
I thought my statistics, when I looked at the feature conversations that I had with Italian filmmakers, I counted the last 61, and 21 were with women and 40 with men. So it's not so bad when you look at the numbers. Antonietta, I would like to start with you and to do a follow-up on the question that was raised. As a director, did you have to become a producer to be a director?
Allora, innanzitutto buonasera, sono contenta di essere qui a Casa Italiana, di ritrovare il direttore che sono stata qui una decina di anni fa. E quindi grazie mille ad Angela, Angela Prudenzi e Federico Spoletti per aver creato questa occasione. E sono stata costretta, allora vorrei dire una cosa, che io sono contenta che ci sia questa occasione, ma spero che fra 10 anni ci incontriamo e parliamo di altro. Questo è il più grande desiderio che ho, cioè nel senso che dovrebbe essere tutto già normale, dovrebbe essere già tutto fatto, e invece non è così.
First of all, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here back at Casa Italiana and to see the director, Stefano Albertini, again. I was here 10 years ago and I have great memories, and I want to thank Angela Prudenzi and Federico Spoletti for creating this opportunity for all of us. Now, I'm happy that we're here and that we're devoting attention to this topic, but my true hope is that in 10 years' time, when I come back again, we will no longer need to talk about this. My hope is that it will be over, it will be a given, and we will no longer need to focus on it.
Io ho iniziato a fare questo lavoro nel 1985 e devo dire che i primi 20 anni della mia vita non ho avuto alcun problema, cioè nel senso che venivo da una famiglia dove c'era un gran matriarcato, non da piccola, quindi pensavo che tutto questo fosse superato. E credo invece improvvisamente, devo dire, si è alzato un muro enorme davanti a me non è tanto il problema di le donne riescono a dirigere, le donne riescono, lo fanno e lo fanno benissimo. Il problema è che quando devi entrare nell'industria, spesso succede qualcosa per cui non hai più un credito, perché appunto è più facile ed è più normale, nei posti di potere ci sono già gli uomini che scelgono gli uomini, ci sono delle situazioni per cui le donne si parla, che le donne siano a parlare, sono più brave, sono più, siamo più non so che cosa. Poi però quando dobbiamo avere dei posti di potere, difficilmente vengono diciamo occupati dalle donne.
I started doing this job in 1985, and for the first 20 years of my life, I never thought that being a woman would be a problem because I come from a family that's deeply matriarchal, so I thought that this was a non-issue. And then suddenly, it's as if a huge wall came up right in front of me. It's not an issue of wondering whether women can or cannot be successful, because of course they can, and they make movies and they do that very well. But when one starts to approach the industry, something happens and women lose credit. It's as if men are in a position of power and other men talk to them and they talk among each other, and women are seen as good when it's time to talk, but then not when it's time to implement. Because whenever the true power is at stake, they end up not having it.
Quindi io personalmente ho avuto una battuta d'arresto molto forte perché ho difeso un mio film e a torto, a ragione, sono stata molto diretta con parti importanti delle istituzioni. E quando una donna, secondo il potere sbaglia, secondo me viene colpita di più di un uomo, viene punita di più di un uomo.
Personally, I had an issue and I had to stop because at some point I defended one of my projects very strongly before an important person who had a privileged position. And I find that when a woman makes a mistake, she ends up being punished a lot more harshly than a man would.
Però noi donne siamo anche molto determinate, quindi l'idea di produrre, cioè diciamo quando ci sono degli ostacoli, siamo abbastanza propensi a costruire, non so come dire, costruiamo anche culturalmente, quindi l'idea di costruirsi una propria casa e una propria casa di produzione è una forma di resistenza anche a delle cifre che, come diceva Angela Prudenzi, sono delle cifre che, perché quelle sono importanti, quelle denotano, come dire, uno squilibrio, perché io posso parlare, ma uno dice, io conosco 3 persone che fanno le registe, non è vero che ce ne sono poche, ma invece e alla fine le cifre parlano molto di più di quello che posso dire io o che può dire chiunque altra collega. Quindi l'idea di produrre è un'idea di resistenza, è un'idea anche di prendere, non è un problema di occupazione delle donne, è un problema che le donne devono raggiungere, diciamo così, dei livelli di apicali per poter veramente incidere e avere una vera e propria rappresentatività che fa bene a tutti.
However, as women, we're very determined, and when we face an obstacle, we tend to want to build upon it. Culturally, it's that way. So building or creating one's own production company is an act of resistance. We saw the numbers, Angela mentioned them, and they do scream. It's a deep imbalance, and people can say, oh, anecdotally, I know three women filmmakers, so it's not true. There's very many women filmmakers, but the statistics are there, and they speak very loudly. So production becomes resistance, and us women need to reach top levels, executive levels, because in order to make an impact, we need to be active at that level.
Ovviamente nella mia piccola casa di produzione il problema non sono le quote rosa, ma sono quelle azzurre, cioè nel senso che è la ricerca di avere un equilibrio anche di presenze maschili e non solo femminili.
In my small production company, the issue is not so much having more women, but rather the other way around, is we need to include more men.
Ovviamente lì dove l'industria in qualche modo mi ha creato delle grandi barriere, io ho iniziato a fare documentari, ho iniziato a fare film partecipati, ho iniziato a aiutare i giovani, cioè ho iniziato a fare quello che mi era possibile fare, ma la mia esperienza non è isolata, sono esperienze di tante altre donne. Infatti ci sono molte documentariste, cioè ci sono molte donne che non riuscendo a gestire budget per vari motivi che abbiamo detto grandi, realizzano documentari o anche perché gli interessa la vita, diciamo più il cinema della realtà da quello della finzione, e questo penso che sia una strada diciamo ottima per poter essere non solo padroni del proprio cinema, ma poter aiutare anche altre donne, poter diciamo contribuire ad avere una parità di genere che non è solo numerica, ma è anche di dare alle donne quella responsabilità che tutti invocano ma che nessuno gli dà.
So wherever the industry put an obstacle in front of me, I decided to turn that into an advantage, and I started making documentaries and also what I called participated films, and I started helping young people. I did whatever I could. And that's not something that I just did on my own. There's very many women that decide to become documentarians. And they also do that because they're interested in telling stories that are real stories. And this is an excellent path to be followed, which leads women not to just to create their own cinema and tell their own stories, but also to help other female filmmakers, which is the only path that we can follow to have equality in between genders, which is something that everybody talks about, but nobody truly works to implement.
Shall we, let's see, maybe Wilma also, who is here with us from Rome. Would you like to talk about your experiences and also about your work with America?
Wilma, ci puoi parlare delle tue esperienze e in particolare magari partiamo dal tuo rapporto con l'America?
Del mio rapporto con?
Con l'America.
Beh, il rapporto con l'America è stato molto profondo perché per ovvi motivi di età faccio parte di una generazione che aveva 20 anni negli anni 70 e quindi scopriva il cinema americano degli anni 70, che è stato un'esperienza per me molto formativa e importante, anche perché ho continuato a seguire le sorti di Hollywood e il cambiamento radicale di Hollywood che quel cinema ha provocato a Hollywood. Volevo raccontare un episodio che mi è accaduto moltissimi anni fa a proposito di quello che si è detto fino adesso. Avevo una bellissima storia fra le mani, molti anni fa, e cercavo un produttore importante che la finanziasse. Fui ricevuta da una famosissima produttrice, una donna molto ricca, molto potente, molto bella, era alta 2 metri e fui ricevuta da lei con un abito elegantissimo, un tailleur, ancora me lo ricordo, un tailleur di Chanel con una minigonna molto corta, dei tacchi molto alti e io ero seduta un po' spaventata e lei camminava avanti e indietro parlandomi a tratti e a tratti telefonando. Le piaceva moltissimo la mia storia. Lei mi disse: se me la vendi, ti faccio un contratto per 3 film, ma per 3 commedie, perché per girare questo film, quello che poi io ho girato, che si chiamava La mia generazione, ci vuole un manico. Per la traduzione, un manico in Italia è un signore che guida molto bene e che ha anche un grande membro. Questo intendiamo noi per manico. E non puoi farlo tu.
Okay, my relationship with America is very deep. And I, in terms of my age, I was 20 in the 70s, and so I grew up with American cinema of the 70s, and it was a very important, formative experience for me. And then I kept following Hollywood, and I was really impressed by how that industry has changed in such a radical way, and all the societal changes that were implemented because of that. Now, I wanted to tell you a story that truly happened to me many years ago. I had written a beautiful story, and I was looking for a producer that could get the project started and find financing. And I met with a very famous producer who was a woman. She was rich and beautiful and tall, almost 6 feet tall. And she was wearing this very elegant suit, this Chanel suit with a really short mini skirt and really high heels. And during the meeting, I was sitting there with her and I was really afraid of her. She kept walking up and down, pacing the room, and between the talk, she would take off and make calls. And at the end of it, she told me, look, I love your story, and if you're ready to sell it to me, I'm going to sign a contract for you for 3 movies. But the other 3 need to be comedies. Because in order to make this movie, and it's a movie that I ended up making, and the title translates as My Generation, you need what in Italian is known as un manico, which translates as a handle. And a handle is a man who is good at driving, but most importantly, who has a big dick.
Posso dire un'altra brevissima cosa?
Can I say another beautiful thing?
Okay. Yes, of course.
Certo.
Of course.
Posso?
May I?
Absolutely.
Certo.
Io credo anche che le donne facciano qualche volta, ma ormai sempre più spesso, un cinema abbastanza diverso, perché hanno uno sguardo e un linguaggio completamente diverso da quello degli uomini e raccontano storie diverse. Basta pensare, non so, a un film come Titan che ha vinto a Cannes e questo probabilmente disturba un po' perché il cinema femminile è un po' meno, fortunatamente, istituzionale di quello maschile. E quindi, come sempre, siamo un po' scomode, anche come artiste.
I believe that women sometimes, but more and more so, make a different kind of cinema because they have a different outlook compared to men. And let's just think about Titan that won Cannes. So the kind of movies that we make tend to disturb because it's a kind of cinema that's less institutional as opposed to what men make. So as usual, we are uncomfortable, or we make people uncomfortable also as artists.
Elisabetta, I saw you were taking notes while the others were talking. Would you like to continue here with your experiences?
So I will try to speak in English, seeing that I studied cinema in the United States at the California Institute of the Arts in CalArts in Valencia, California. And why I went to the state to study? Because when I decided that I wanted really to work in cinema, in film, and learn how to make film, in Italy I couldn't do it. I was too old. I remember I was 28, and there were not many film schools, and so I'm talking about the access of women also to school, to education. So I couldn't, there was only the Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia in Roma, which has a great tradition, but there is, you can't apply, at least at that time, if you are more than 25. So I said, what can I do? So this is a problem. Nowadays, I can say that there are more film schools. There is another important film school in Rome, which is, thank you, Gian Maria Volonté. There is another important film school in Milano. There are many little schools, but there are not many important film schools in Italy. But I think that these film schools have been a good way for women to learn, especially the new generation, because if you look who are the women who are working in film now, who are film directors, the new generation, I'm talking about women around 30, 40 years old and even younger, they mostly come out from the school, which once instead you learn doing film, going on the set, be part of the crew and in a different way. So what I was, because I belong to the same generation of Wilma, I agree with her about the consideration and the love for American film of those years. No, the first independent film, American film that came out in the 70s when they, Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Grazie, Pino. No, the Hollywood, when Hollywood, I mean, they great producer. You were asking before why if it's a burden for a woman being a producer, and I don't think so. Women who are producer also have a great advantage of being able to control what they do, and so in the Hollywood here at that time, the independent film director were also producing. The independence came from the possibility to produce themselves, to produce their film. So talking about Italian cinema and the Italian women in film, I know that the numbers are quite sad, but what can I say? That actually another thing that I share with what Wilma was saying before is that the new generation of film directors, but not only the new one, I mean the few women who are film directors actually are more autrici, we can say auteurs in the French way. So they, if they have the strength, the energy to stay in this difficult world, is because they can also, I mean, they fight for what they really want to say, and it's more personal and in this way artistic film. This doesn't mean that there are not women who works in the industry, also in TV. My personal experience was that at a certain moment I start directing TV series, and was quite difficult. At that time, I also was one of the few women directing TV series for our national broadcast, RAI. And I remember the crew. I had a crew that wasn't really believing at the beginning that I could be able to work for 6 months in the row with 40 people in the crew, sorry. And so it was difficult. Now is getting a little better. So we can also talk about what is better now, in a way. If the numbers are bad, that doesn't, for women, that doesn't mean that there are not good women film director around, that with their film can also reach outside of the country. No, you work for film festival, for Venezia Film Festival, and you know now there are good Italian film directors that with their work are able also to travel outside of Italy. And there is also, talking about the TV world, able also to direct TV series. No, I think, for instance, about Valeria Golino in this moment. Now, Valeria Golino started his career as an actress, and then she became also a director, and now she's also a producer, and she's going to produce a new TV series from an Italian novel written by a woman, Goliarda Sapienza, The Art of Joy. So there are, no, I'm taking a good example also, not to be so negative. It's not easy, but there is some possibility also.
Definitely.
Not give up.
Quality, quantity is not quality. Federica, I want to bring you in to the conversation. I saw your interview in the New Yorker with Sophia Loren, and you asked her a question, what was the best, who gave you the best advice? And her answer was Sophia, me, myself. And I thought that was very impressive. So who gave you the best advice?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you, and thanks everybody. I just wanted to say very quickly that I feel very honored to be here tonight amongst these amazing filmmakers and women. That's a great question. Who gave me the best advice? I think there isn't really a person. I feel like it's been, I think I can point out an experience that has been, that sort of enabled me to be to get the confidence that I needed in order to just be bold about the things that I wanted to do. It wasn't really a person. For me in my life, it was the experience of just be a part of a very special festival in Italy. That's the Gifoni Film Festival, which Italians probably know pretty well. It was something I saw growing up in the TV, on the TV while I was in my little apartment in Marche, and then I was lucky to be part of as a juror later on in my life, and it was the experience. And the reason why I bring that up, it's because it was this shared experience of community and the discussion around films that weren't mainstream and available at movies about subject matters and things that I had no idea about. And so yeah, I think that the people I met at Gifoni were really sort of the people who sort of pushed me to and gave me the best advice in a way. And yeah, I hope that answers. Yeah.
I would like to ask, actually, that's something that I'm very curious, you're all in the film industry. What made you fall in love with cinema in the first place? Was it a particular movie? Was it an actor, an actress? Just an experience, somebody you went to see a film with? I don't know. Who wants to start?
I'll go start. For me, it was probably the first time I saw Roma Città Aperta, Rome Open City in middle school. I remember just that. It was just sort of, I saw the movie and it just stayed with me. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but the experience of seeing the movie was was a little bit life-changing. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone else wants to.
I grew up in a family which we were watching movie always, and our parents were taking us to watch movies of many different kinds. On Italian TV, when I was pretty young, we could see from Eisenstein to, there were a lot of nice, interesting film critics who were running interesting programs. So we were watching also, even if we were very young, very child, very complicated film. And then my grandmother was taking us to see funny film, just to balance the experience. So I grew up knowing cinema, so it was something that I knew from when I was very little, that not that I wanted to make film, but was to me familiar watching movies, and very different movie, one from the other.
Come Betta, anche io vengo da una famiglia che amava molto il cinema, mia madre soprattutto, e vedeva molti film a settimana. Insomma, quando era possibile andava a vedere tutte le prime e mi portava, ero bambina, io mi ricordo insomma che l'accompagnavo, a volte mi ha fatto entrare anche a vedere dei film che non avrei dovuto, fingeva lei che fossi un po' più grande. Però a un certo punto c'è stato un film che mi ha fatto capire che il cinema era qualcosa di speciale. Io amavo molto leggere e pensavo che appunto il cinema fosse un modo per appropriarsi di storie, per conoscere delle storie diverse, in maniera lineare. Poi, grazie alla televisione italiana, perché come diceva Betta, quando io ero ragazzina era veramente, si poteva vedere di tutto, vedevamo dei film meravigliosi. Una sera mi è capitato di vedere l'anno scorso a Marienbad di Alain René, e fu una folgorazione perché capii che il cinema poteva raccontare il tempo in una maniera non lineare, e lì ho capito che era qualcosa di magico, che io in qualche modo avrei voluto vivere fino in fondo, l'esperienza e le emozioni che il cinema regalava. Non sapevo ancora come, e poi vabbè, insomma, sono diventata una giornalista, un critico cinematografico, ma ecco, il cinema è diventata la mia strada vedendo quel film.
As Betta was saying, I had a similar experience. My family was a cinema-loving family, and in particular, my mother was truly passionate, and she would go watch premieres all the time, and she would take me with her, even when I was a small child. Sometimes I ended up seeing movies that I shouldn't have seen at that age, and she would pretend I was older than I actually was. As a kid, I loved reading, and I thought that cinema was a great way to tell stories or to have special access into a story. But up until then, I was used to linear storytelling. And then, thanks to Italian television, as Betta was saying, Italian television in the past used to show amazing films. And one night I happened upon a wonderful film that struck me like a lightning. And it was last year in Marienbad by Alain René. And as I was saying, it's something that shook my whole being. And it showed me that cinema would allow one to approach a story in a non-linear way. And it was magical for me. And I wanted to be immersed in that as much as I could. I didn't know what I would end up doing in the film industry, and I ended up being a journalist and a film critic, but I did know that cinema was going to be a part of my life forever.
Allora, io personalmente non avrei mai immaginato di fare cinema, e l'ho fatto assolutamente mi è capitato. Nel senso che andavo a cinema da bambina, ci sono dei film che mi hanno colpito molto, dei film tipo Incompreso, oppure Gian Burrasca, oppure Viaggio nel corpo umano, cioè mi piaceva molto il cinema, ma non avrei mai immaginato di farlo. Ma quando ero adolescente ero proprio una ragazza irrequieta che non sapeva che cosa, non riuscivo a capire che cosa sarei potuta diventare, ero proprio così, sbandata, e non capivo che cosa poteva succedere di me. Però succedeva questo, che quando mi fidanzavo, come una specie di Zelig, io diventavo i sogni dei miei fidanzati, cioè incontravo un rappresentante di vestiti e facevo la modella, ho incontrato un fotografo e ho iniziato a fare la fotografa, e qui già la cosa mi iniziava a piacere. Poi ho incontrato un giovane operatore che voleva fare un regista, e ho detto: scusate, se vuoi fare il regista, quindi nella volontà di come dire, realizzare il sogno di un altro, sono partita per Roma e ho iniziato a fare questo mestiere. Devo dire, l'ho fatto per qualcun altro, però mi sono trovata in una situazione che ero proprio a mio agio. Cioè, a scuola io andavo malissimo, invece a cinema, con la presa, mi sono trovata molto comoda, e quindi quello che vi posso consigliare è di fare delle cose per gli altri, perché poi ti ritornano 3 volte di più. Grazie.
Personally, I never thought I would end up being a filmmaker or producer working in cinema. I just happened on it. As a kid, I would go to the cinema. I would watch movies such as Incompreso or Giamburrasca or Viaggio nel Corpo Umano. And I never imagined that that would end up being my life. As I was a troubled teenager, I had no idea what I would end up doing. I was off, and I really, I had boyfriends, and I would be like Zelig, and I would turn into the dream of the person I was with. So if I was dating somebody who was selling clothes, I would be a model. And then I ended up meeting a photographer, and I became a photographer. I liked that. And then I ended up meeting a camera operator who dreamt of being a filmmaker, and he wasn't quite making it, but I thought I could help him. And so I went to Rome, and I started getting involved with the film industry. And I ended up finding a space that really worked for me. I was never a good student at school. I was never happy. But on a film set, I found the right environment for me. So my suggestion to all of you is, if you want to do something, do it for others. By doing something for others, you might end up finding what truly works for yourself.
Perfect answer. Wilma, we have not heard from you. Do you want to share your...
Wilma, ci vuoi raccontare anche tu che cosa ti ha portato a amare il cinema?
Purtroppo non ho sentito, mi dispiace. Non sento molto bene. I can't hear you.
Wilma, ci vuoi raccontare che cosa ti ha fatto innamorare del cinema?
Sì. Durante l'infanzia io sono la quarta di due genitori molto adulti, la quarta figlia. Quindi passavo moltissimo tempo con i miei due fratelli maschi, che sono molto più grandi di me. E loro andavano al cinema, andavano alla sala parrocchiale del quartiere a vedere dei film western e mi portavano qualche volta, a patto che io non chiedessi mai di essere portata al bagno. Però ho passato molti anni in questo cinema molto simile a quello di Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, cioè con una partecipazione molto vivace della sala, del pubblico, e a vedere molti film western, quindi ho maturato anche appunto durante l'infanzia un rapporto col cinema americano. Detto questo, ho cominciato a fare cinema grazie a una ricerca che ho fatto durante gli studi universitari. Mi chiesero di trovare dei libri in biblioteca per un documentario che stavano preparando. Io mi ricordo che lavoravo in biblioteca e poi andavo in questa redazione del documentario dove tutti mi sembrava che si divertissero come pazzi. Avevano i piedi sul tavolo, fumavano, non avevano orari. Mi sembrava un posto estremamente interessante. Poi un giorno alle 6:30 di mattina mi telefonano, non c'erano i cellulari, era un telefono fisso, e mi dicono: vieni con noi, andiamo a girare, sei stata brava a fare la ricerca. E quindi mi portarono a fare le riprese, ero molto giovane, e le riprese consistevano in questo: erano appunto gli anni 70, e in Italia c'era un movimento molto importante che si chiamava psichiatria democratica, e che metteva in discussione molto fortemente il servizio sanitario che si occupava delle malattie mentali dei pazienti. Quindi il documentario consisteva in questo, nel portare a fare una gita i pazienti di un padiglione di un ospedale molto psichiatrico che è stato molto famoso a Roma e che si chiamava Santa Maria della Pietà. Il padiglione era il padiglione numero 17 e questi pazienti non uscivano dall'ospedale da 25 anni. E io fui assegnata al pullman con i pazienti e erano i matti e quindi mettevano molta paura. E sono stata molti giorni con loro durante le riprese del documentario, ho provato delle emozioni così potenti e così profonde che mi hanno, primo, molto segnata, secondo, convinta che quello era il mestiere che io avrei voluto fare.
As a child, I was the fourth daughter out of two parents who were much older. So I spent a lot of time with my two older male brothers, and they used to go to the cinema a lot. This cinema was in my neighborhood. It was a little church cinema, and my brothers would just watch Westerns, and they would drag me along only on condition that I would never ask to be taken to the bathroom. And then after spending many years in this cinema, which was very similar to what you see in Nuovo Cinema Paradiso, where all the spectators are deeply involved with what is going on. So it was a great community, and I saw lots of Westerns. And, so I loved that already. But I actually started working in the film industry because when I was in college, I was assigned a research project, and I was asked to go find books to do research for a documentary. And so I'd spent weeks and weeks on a library to find all this material. And then occasionally I would go and see the office where they were putting together this documentary. And it seemed like such a fun place to me because people were sitting there with their feet on the table, they were smoking, there was no real schedule, they would come and go. I thought it was a fascinating place. And then one day, back then there were no cell phones, so at 6:30 a.m. I get a phone call on my landline, and they're telling me, get dressed, come with us, we're gonna go shoot, and you've been so good with your research that we wanna bring you along. So the shoot was actually, it's back in the 70s, and there was a movement at the time which was known as democratic psychiatry. And that movement was challenging what the national healthcare system was doing in terms of mental health. And the documentary was about a situation in a ward in a mental health hospital, in a psychiatric hospital known in Rome as Santa Maria della Pietà. And we were shooting in ward number 17. And the patients in there were patients who had not left that facility for 25 years. So I was assigned to the bus with the patients. And they were all crazy people that were fear-inducing, and I loved them. I spent days and days with them. And the emotion I felt was so deep and so powerful that it left a deep mark in me, and it convinced me that that was going to be my job for life.
Thank you. Great story. And I just have to comment the Westerns. You will see her film in a minute or two. There is a quality of a Western in Trieste to your film. I can see that. Thank you all very much for being here for this wonderful discussion. I think this is all the time we have. Thank you.
Wilma, stiamo concludendo e adesso il pubblico vedrà il tuo film. Se vuoi dire qualcosa per presentare il film, a te la parola.
Non ho sentito purtroppo.
Il gruppo di discussione è finito, il pubblico adesso sta per vedere il tuo film. Se vuoi dire qualcosa per presentare il film, a te la parola.
Grazie. Dunque, questo film devo dire che mi ha molto coinvolta e molto segnata, ma non è una novità. Io non ho fatto molti film, ci metto molti anni per fare un film e quindi tutti mi segnano e tutti lasciano un'impressione dentro di me molto forte, molto potente. Anche se non sono perfetti, anche se magari sono, anzi, assolutamente imperfetti. Forse è molto molto banale dire che i film per alcuni tipi di donne sono anche dei figli. E questo è un film in cui io ho stabilito un rapporto molto profondo con la protagonista, perché lo ritenevo necessario, perché è una storia che per un'attrice, soprattutto giovane e poco esperta come lei, era importante che si sentisse molto protetta e molto ricoperta proprio affettivamente. E quindi ho cercato di esserle molto vicino, anche perché il film racconta di una maternità conflittuale e forse lei è stata l'attrice, che si chiama Alma Noce, una figlia che non ho mai avuto, la figlia che non ho mai avuto. Non vorrei dire molte cose sul film che state per vedere, non vorrei men che meno raccontarvelo. Posso dirvi solo una cosa di cui sono molto sicura, molto certa, che la protagonista è una ragazza giovanissima che quando ha fatto il film era completamente inesperta, ma che ha molto talento e che farà molta strada.
This is a movie that had a deep impact on me. And this is no news because any movie I make has that impression on me because I'm not somebody who makes many movies. I take a long time in between movies. So all of them leave a deep mark in me. Even when they're not perfect, absolutely when they're imperfect. So I think it's quite self-evident to say that films for a certain kind of woman end up being the children that she may or may not have. And this is a movie in which I have created a very deep relationship with the protagonist. I I believe that it was fundamental to proceed that way. This is a story in which the lead actress is a very young woman who was not experienced at all at the time. And I felt it was deeply necessary for her to feel protected, to feel covered by affection. So I tried to do anything I could to be very close to her. Also, this film tells a story of a conflictual motherhood, and she, the lead actress, her name is Alma Noce, ended up becoming the child I never had. I don't want to tell you much more about this movie because you're about to watch it. There's one thing that I'm quite certain about. The lead actress, who was a very young girl and very naive and lacked a lot of experience when she shot this movie, is extremely talented, and she will go a long way.